Hello and welcome, Nick. How are you?
Hello, Clenton. I'm not too bad, thank you. I'm very, very warm. How are you?
I'm loving the weather, loving it. You know, the Caribbean weather, beautiful.
Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm sweating buckets here. Oh, that's not very nice for our listeners, is it? But, yeah, I think it's about to absolutely pour down here in Newcastle. The clouds are turning very, very dark indeed, as the rest of the country enjoys basking sunshine. But there you go.
Oh,
That's the northeast.
You're not going to dampen my sunshine in the Midlands.
Oh, I would never dream of dampening your Midlands sunshine. So we've had our second podcast recording today for Chats, our new podcast series. Today we met with Sarah Bedford, who heads up social policy research at the New Economics Foundation, or NEF as it's sometimes called. And she's leading projects on social action and looking at the future of adult social care, and did a really interesting piece of work with Community Catalyst recently, looking at community microenterprise as being a driver of local economic development in social care, to which she touches on a little bit throughout the interview, and you'll be hearing a little bit about that in a minute. I thought it was really, really interesting. I'd learned a massive amount there, Clenton. There was so much about this world that I don't understand, but I certainly feel better informed from that. What did you think?
Most definitely, Nick. I was really interested in how research is being used, and especially the definitions that they're talking around inclusive wealth building, and how they're using research to try and address some of the health equality issues, and how community-led enterprise can lead the way through the pandemic.
So yeah, we started off by asking Sarah our quick-fire question. So let's get straight into it. Sarah, lovely to have you with us today. We always kick off our interviews with some quick-fire getting to know you questions before we get into the meat of the discussion. And I'll hand over to Clenton for the first one.
Sarah, can you just tell us what's your favourite meal?
I think I would probably pick pad thai, and I'm kind of missing it at the moment because I haven't been out to eat or even really had a takeaway since lockdown started.
All right, next question from me, Sarah. Any pets?
No pets, but I'm currently living with my partner and his family, and they've got a dog and 2 cats and 4 chickens.
Okay, that's really interesting. You got any particular hobbies or pastimes that you enjoy?
Rock climbing. I got into it probably about 5-10 years ago. Yeah, that's my kind of passion, really.
Do you have a favourite TV show, Sarah?
Don't know if I have a favourite. I mean, I'm a big fan of all the Netflix dramas, really, like stuff like Orange is the New Black. I love that kind of series. I've been watching Money Heist recently, which had 40 episodes to get through, and I really enjoyed that.
Could you tell us the last book you read?
I am currently reading Anna Karenina, which sounds like a bit of a pretentious choice, doesn't it? But I am really enjoying it. It's 850 pages long, so yeah, it's a bit of a commitment, but I've got into it a lot more than I thought I would.
What would be your favourite place to go on holiday, Sarah?
Well, my favourite place, this links back to the rock climbing, is a Greek island called Kalymnos, which is a tiny island, and it's got some of the best rock climbing in the world. It's full of rock climbers when you go there, and it feels like you're in the middle of nowhere, and it's really beautiful.
And this is the $100 question. Now,
Okay.
What would you do with £1 million?
Oh my gosh. I like to hope that I wouldn't spend all of it entirely selfishly, and that I would try and do some good with some of it. But I think I would also probably more selfishly treat myself to a bit of time traveling, buying a van and traveling around Europe, doing lots of kind of hiking and climbing kinds of things.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well done, Sarah. That's the end of our quickfire questions. You've managed to get through them. Thanks for enduring that.
Can you tell us what is meant by inclusive wealth building?
I think there's been a lot of new and really exciting thinking on this in the past 10 years in particular. And I think what's distinctive about a lot of this thinking is the understanding of an inclusive economy as one in which economic activity in and of itself is inclusive. I think that distinguishes the concept from other ideas like inclusive growth, for example, that have also been quite prevalent. And I think that means things like, in practice, models of ownership that distribute control and distribute wealth, good jobs that offer fair pay and security and are accessible to a wide range of people, and institutions that are rooted in places like local councils or hospitals or universities, supporting the development of inclusive ownership models and good jobs in lots of different ways, including through the procurement of goods and services. And I think that probably the most famous example in the UK, at least, is Preston, where the council, supported by CLES, or the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, set out to build a more inclusive economy through measures like increasing the proportion of public spending in the local economy.
You've done some recent research, Sarah, with Community Catalyst as well. A lot of that being on community-led enterprise, community micro-enterprises. What impact do you see generally around the difference that local enterprises, local community enterprises have on the health of the population of the community that they serve?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to think about inclusive economies and local wealth building in the context of the question of how can we improve health and reduce health inequalities. You know, I think often when we think about health, we think about healthcare, but of course healthcare is, you know, what we look for if we fall ill and we need treatment. And if we're trying to understand the things that help us to stay well in the first place, then we need to look to wider factors. And you know, we already know what these factors are. You know, they're the conditions in which we live, things like an income that's enough to live on and that's secure, a good education and good work, a decent home, surroundings that are safe and enable services and facilities and green spaces to be within people's reach. And, you know, your level of access to these things influences how healthy you are. That's why policymakers talk about them as the social determinants of health. And inequalities in access to these things lead to inequalities in health. And there's a really strong kind of place-based dimension to this, in that there is a huge health gap in healthy life expectancy between wealthier and more deprived areas. So people in the least deprived areas of the country can expect to live around 18 more years in good health than those in the most deprived areas. So I think efforts to build more inclusive local economies are a response to all that. They're a response to worsening health in the past 10 years and worsening health inequalities as well.
How can community-led enterprise and business, how can they play part in supporting local economies, and why are they important?
I think one of the interesting things about the inclusive economies agenda, so, you know, I talked about how local authorities are increasingly interested in it, but I think communities are also increasingly interested in it. And they are, you know, as you say, doing things to change their neighbourhoods from the bottom up, and increasingly sort of recognising the local economy to be a domain that they are important actors in. And I think particularly for those based in deprived areas, they want to see material improvements to their neighbourhoods and the lives of people who are living in those neighbourhoods. I've been working with a couple of different community organisations in Grimsby. One of those is called Centre 4, They're a community hub, and one of the participants on a programme that's funded by Power to Change, which is aiming to reduce inequalities in general by boosting local economies in deprived areas, and does that through supporting community hubs like Centre4 to catalyse the development of community businesses. So Centre4, for example, has helped to set up an ethical recruitment agency which supports people to find jobs, but also if they need help with developing their skills and building their confidence, it connects them with roles on community projects so that they can gain experience, and it uses all of its surplus to support those people and those projects. So I think that, as an example, is an illustration of the wider benefits that you can get to society as well as to your economy from investing in the development of and supporting the development of community businesses and, more generally inclusive models of ownership.
Thanks, Sarah. And could you tell us a little bit about the research that you published recently alongside Community Catalysts and what that was trying to explore?
That research was specifically looking at the benefits that community micro-enterprises in social care bring to local economies. There's already research that's been done looking at the quality of the care and support that those micro-enterprises provide. So we were interested in the kind of broader question of the impact that they have on their local economy. And one of the areas that we looked at, for instance, we did a few case studies. So we looked at Somerset, got one of the fastest ageing populations in the UK, and people who live in remote areas of the county and who need support in their own homes really struggle to access that support. And the local council approached Community Catalysts because of that, and because they knew, or at least they thought, that there were people across Somerset who might be interested in providing that support, but who aren't looking for a role in a traditional home care agency. So Community Catalysts began working in the area to help those people to set up their own micro-enterprises. And the council's original aim was to support the development of 50 micro-enterprises, but they underestimated how responsive local residents would be, and they now have more than 450 micro-enterprises who are operating in Somerset and who are mostly sole traders providing home care and home help. One interesting thing that these micro-enterprises have done is to work collaboratively. So with support from Community Catalysts, they've formed a self-organising network comprised of various different local groups that communicate via WhatsApp, meet once a month to support each other and share good practice and introduce each other to people who are looking for support. I think it's an interesting case study. It's one of many. Obviously, there are community micro-enterprises in lots of different parts of the country. And our kind of wider research showed that in a context where social care jobs, for instance, are often really stressful, people working for micro-enterprises feel that they have autonomy and control. So, yeah, I think that's really important. I think looking both at the value that's created by the care, but also the value that's how good the jobs are really matters, and the two interact.
So how can that research, how will we use that research to help build a better future from the research that you've just talked about?
I think that's a really important question. I think that's the question that everyone should be asking, even before they've begun the research. And certainly the reason that Sian from Community Catalyst, the reason that she wanted to do the research was because she felt that there are conversations that you can have with social care commissioners who speak one language, and then conversations that you can have with economic policymakers, local economic policymakers who speak a different language. And that actually she wanted to find ways to talk about community enterprises and the work that they do in social care in both of those different languages, And I think the research is important for that reason, really. I think it's important, and I think it's useful to talk about social care as a major sector of the economy and to recognise it as such, because, you know, often it gets put into the box of being a service that is a cost, you know, to the public purse, and there's a big focus, you know, in the media. That's often how it's talked about. But actually, it's a foundational sector of the economy, in that it provides an essential service that people need, and the degree of access that people have to that service and the quality of the service itself influence the well-being of millions of people. But it's also a major employer. As a sector, it employs 1.5 million people in England, and their working conditions have a huge impact on them and their lives. And I think recognising social care, thinking about social care in that way, allows you to think more broadly about how investment in social care, for instance in community micro-enterprise, can lead to a broader range of social and economic benefits to an area than is generally recognised.
Thank you. Just one more question that leads on from your answer, Sarah. And what's your hope for the future when it comes to research and how we could use research to build back better post-COVID?
Thinking about the economic recovery from the pandemic and thinking about where research can help, I think we need as much evidence that we can get to build the case for building back better. And I think, you know, we're in store for a recession. I think there's going to be a lot of unemployment. We're not quite seeing at the moment because the furlough scheme is masking it, but there have been projections that there will be 3 million people unemployed this year, 3.5 million by next year, which are levels of unemployment that we haven't seen since the 80s. There's a need for much more thinking in general and more research to support and to push the government to come up with a plan for stimulating the economy and for creating jobs. And I think there are a couple of kind of questions that are really important there. One is, how do you target job creation in sectors that generate benefits to society? Another is, you know, how do you make sure that the new jobs that you create are good jobs? So, you know, more research on that, I think, is one of the things that's really needed. And, you know, we've talked about public services, we've talked about social care. I think there's a really strong case to be made for investing in that kind of social infrastructure. It's very labour intensive, it's relatively low carbon, which is really important, but most of all it supports health and well-being and it reduces inequalities.
Thank you very much for that, from my perspective. Really useful.
Sarah, thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that. I found it hugely informative. I've learned a massive amount from listening to you there. I'm just so grateful that organisations like yours exist, because I think the research and the policy work you're putting out at the moment, it's never been more needed. So I hope you continue to have great success with what you do. And thank you very much for coming on today and sharing everything about your work that you've done so far.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Clenton. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.